happy to reiterate some of my points there, because I do think that they were important, in terms of, and I'll kind of do it. I'll try
Yeah,
to do it
Tim.
quicker. Yeah,
You,
because I was talking about this whole idea of setting up two sets of books and the theopolitical status, and we were talking about the influence or encroachment of philosophy, right? And this idea of setting up two sets of books, right? Now we agree that, or at least I think me and Unseen tacitly agree that Christianity used philosophy, right in the beginning, right?
uh,
Um,
they talk
I'm
to them.
not
They talk to
sure.
the philosophers in their terms, so they could be understood. Is how I read it. They
I,
didn't use it. They tried to reach the philosophers using their own terms.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
not.
anyways, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Claire.
I'm just wondering. No, I'm not sure which bit you mean. Like, I don't know which bit you mean or what aspect. I'm afraid I don't. I'm not sure what you mean.
We were we were watching Jay Dyer. He's a philosopher, and he tries to like bring Christians into the argument,
Well,
and
I know he's an Orthodox Christian.
then it came down to separation of church and state. We were TML said he didn't used to believe in separation of church and state, but now he does. And I learned in the book of Daniel that separation of church and state is a biblical principle taught way back.
Yeah,
Right?
Christians are taught this because, it's pretty clear in Romans 13 and in other passages, right? There's a clear, statement against the theopolitical state, right? So there's this idea that, the church and state should not be combined. So this idea of not setting up two sets of books, when they had the rise of the autocratic state, right? Christianity avoided getting involved in that, right? And it's the same thing in Islam because Islam holds to a theopolitical state. So I was given the concept from the book The Prince by Machiavelli, right? He talks about the Turk and the French, right? So he says he says the beauty in the Turkish state is that they don't have ministers that you can corrupt and then seize control of the state through the ministers. You have to topple the head of the state, which is the caliph, right? But once he said once you take out the caliph, you can easily seize control of the state. Now he says in France it's a different question because they have loyal ministers, right? There's a separation between church and state, right? And
Yeah.
king and pope and that sort of thing, right? So
No, no,
once,
Mhm.
no. Okay, that's not my understanding of how Christianity worked because the whole point of Christianity was that it defended the divine right of the divine right of absolute monarchs to do whatever they liked. Because without the divine right of kings, supported by the Pope in Rome, they would just be warlords without any, moral or divine legitimacy. So that was the point of Christianity, the anointing of the monarch and, all the, stuff about,
Well,
being a good king and stuff.
I just want to
so how
say that
come,
as a Christian, I totally reject that. But I understand where you're coming
right?
from, though.
I'm just
A lot of
speaking in
Christians,
historical terms.
right,
I'm
right. A lot of
speaking
Christians,
in how Christianity worked in Europe.
right, right. A lot of Christians will reject that, mainly for the fact that there's a lot of Christians on the earth that are Protestants.
Yeah, but we need to understand the history of Christianity, whatever
Right,
kind of
right. In the
Christian we
15th
are,
century.
in order to understand, why the West is, where it is now, because Christianity has
Exactly.
basically been failing, in my view, for
Exactly. And
500 years.
you cannot ignore the Protestant Reformation in that.
Well, it's part of the history, right?
Exactly.
It's part of the history of Christianity. But
Yeah.
the thing is, the founding fathers were basically they were the ones who started the whole thing. Like, let's reject monarchy, let's separate the church from the state, and then that kind of started a domino effect of republican revolutions in France and in Russia.
Right. But one cannot ignore the whole idea founded by John Winthrop, right? America
Wait,
was
I haven't
Protestant.
heard of him.
Yeah, America was a Protestant colony. Most of those ideas were based in Protestantism, right? So you're missing the entire thing of how the democratic change, or the whole idea of the autocratic state, would not have come about without the 15th century Protestant Reformation, right?
We're a Freemasonic experiment, really.
Yeah, the Protestant Reformation basically signaled the rise of the secular age, right? The reason is because for two reasons. One reason is because it weakened the rule of the church, right? That's one, right? And the second reason is because the Jews were brought back into Europe, right? They were expelled from many European countries before the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
Okay. This drastically changed the destiny of Europe.
Yeah. That's because of the false timeline.
Yeah. You can't even conceive of world. Yeah, you can't even conceive of World War II without these changes. But yeah, go ahead, Claire. Sorry.
I don't know. I'm very confused about the false timeline and what this has got to do with World War II. I mean, just to understand Christianity, as I understood it.
Well,
I mean,
you got to, as a Christian, there are people that are called futurists, who believes Revelations 1 through 19 are all futuristic.
Rocky's a Protestant. I'm just putting that out there.
I'm not a Protestant.
Yes, you
Well,
are.
I am.
You like
I am
Martin Luther. Of course you're a Protestant.
No, I protested. I protest Rome. That's all that means, protester. That's okay. You can go ahead.
Wait, hold on, guys. Claire, what is your misunderstanding? I would love to know.
No, I don't know. I don't know what you mean by a false timeline. I mean, I feel I'm being bombarded with concepts I'm not familiar with, and so.
Okay, are you familiar with the Protestant Reformation?
Yeah, and it's basically the monarchs rebelling from the Pope and
right.
telling the Pope
right. So it weakened the state, anymore. Right? Well, okay, so it weakened the church, right?
Yeah.
Well, basically the Protestant monarchs were saying we're going to interpret, God's will.
That's right.
For ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It drastically changed the relationship between church and state. And then when they created democratic society in the 16th century, this was not just a coincidence.
I'm sorry, did you say there was a democratic society in the 16th century?
Yes, I'm talking about how they created the concept of democratic society in the 1600s. Following that with Hobbes, Locke, all of these people. Are you familiar with that?
Well, I didn't think of them as democracies at the time. As I see it, there was, first the rule by absolute monarchy, and over the centuries it became more liberal until it has now become a constitutional monarchy, with the king, enjoying even fewer rights than his subjects, such as King Charles.
Yeah, I would say you're right on that. It is a constitutional monarchy, and God is becoming a constitutional monarch. Everything's top up rather than, bottom up than top down, where it used to be.
I'm not sure. I mean, what you mean? I'm basically saying that Christianity has failed to defend the divine right of kings. Because if I were an absolute monarch, why would I become a constitutional monarch and have so few rights? And I guess the answer is that I wouldn't have a choice.
Well, hold on. If you don't mind me asking, sorry to interrupt you, because I don't know your point of view totally. I have a very vague idea, but where exactly do you get the idea that divine right of kings is coming directly out of Christianity?
Well, I would say that's true.
Constantine used Christianity to defend, his empire, didn't he? I mean, the first time Christianity was adopted. Constantine the Great.
And I'm glad that Unseen agrees with you, because I'm genuinely curious. I think we should flesh that idea out first, because if we don't figure out where is that coming from, that would be a problem. Because
Tsar Nicholas II was the same type of monarch, Constantine
but I mean,
was.
Let's think it back to the time of Jesus. Where in the Bible does it say that there's a divine right of kings? I must have missed that part exactly.
Well, that's the thing is you had kings like Nathan going to King Solomon or something. You know, it's just like God always is the one who divinely appoints the
Yeah,
leader,
I
King
agree. See,
David.
I
Right.
agree on that point, but I think when most people think of wait, hold on just one second. Let me make this point. I just want to make sure that we get a distinction here, because I agree with what you just said, but what I'm saying is, like, when you say divine right of kings, people think of like dynasties where, like, I'm the son of this king, therefore I have the right to divinely rule because of a bloodline. So I just want to make sure we make a distinction about bloodline versus what you guys are talking about. You understand? That's what I'm trying to get at. Let's define what we
Well, if you're king and the Pope crowns you, then you have the divine right to rule, right? And then there's this order of succession. I mean, that's how it's always been done.
That's how Roman Catholics view it, right?
Israel.
But as an Orthodox Christian, like, okay, so we have something similar where, you know, there is a ceremony to establish the czar or something like that.
The coronation.
And, yeah, it's similar. But, you know, we would say that, you know, at some point, the Pope, you know, because he was the first of equals initially. He wasn't over the others. You know, the imperial capital of Rome had an honorary title that was given to him because they were in the imperial capital, but it didn't mean that he was the king of bishops or something. So it almost became like this power gave him the ability to elect kings, and that was never supposed to be. It was too much power. And that's why the split kind of happened between Orthodoxy and Rome, because it was like these other patriarchs are saying, you know, you're no larger than our see. There's 5 C's. So 4 C's go against the one because the Pope sees himself as a universal bishop. You know, St. Gregory the Great said that's impossible. That, you know, you can't make a decision outside of your diocese. So the Pope's making decisions outside of his diocese. He's electing kings. He's doing things that are just overstretching his bounds. And then, you know, slowly but surely, we get this supremacy turns into infallibility. And now, you know, it's just endless power. He's God on earth. It is no longer Christ is the head of the church. It's the Pope is the head of the church. And that's not true, at least from my perspective.
I mean, is there a question you were trying to decide? I mean, trying to answer? I'm not sure if this is. I mean, are you? Is there a question?
What I'm answering you is that I don't think that a schismatic or a heretic has the right to make any decisions. Really, I don't believe that they're divine at all. You know.
So you're saying
before, you know.
So you're saying as a Catholic that Protestantism is illegitimate. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying as Orthodox that I think that Roman Catholicism is the first form of Protestantism. I think that the infallibility of the Pope was never the doctrine that was taught in the early church. It was never the doctrine taught by any of the councils, and it developed slowly. And it arose out of forgeries.
Yeah. Right. So is there something that the Pope said that you don't like?
It's not something that he said that I don't like. It's more like doctrine still develop, you know, into something that different from the time of the apostles. You know, they were first of equals. For instance, at the first council of Acts, you know. King of bishops. There was not a pope that was over all the other bishops. They were all equals, first of equals. So the problem is that, you know, he could say that he's giving the divine right to rule to somebody, but he doesn't have the divine right to rule because he broke himself off from the Orthodox Church, which was the original church and the original councils. And that's how I view things because I'm an Orthodox Christian. So it's a little different, you know.
But what, you weren't an Orthodox Christian when you were born, were you?
I mean, what does it have to do with it?
Well, because I know that Orthodox Christianity was not it's not an Anglo-Saxon.
Sure, it is. It's been here, since really the beginning of America. Saint Herman of Alaska in the 1700s was here. It's the West has been Orthodox for a very long time. It's just that the tradition that most of us inherited was Protestantism, but the West was
So you
Orthodox.
were Lutheran? Were your parents Lutheran or Episcopalian?
No. I grew up a Baptist, but then through, I grew up and I started researching Christianity, and I started visiting monasteries and learning history and what actually happened, and I became Orthodox. I became an Orthodox Christian.
Right. And is it because you think the Baptist Church is too liberal? I mean, what
I
made
think
you
that
reject the Baptist
I think
Church?
I don't think it's the church that Christ established. I think there's only one church that Christ established.
But don't you see? I mean, wouldn't you agree that Christianity isn't doing particularly well in Europe?
Well, when Christ comes, will he find faith on the earth? I mean, it's not really about doing particularly well on a worldly scale. If we're looking at
isn't
outside
religion supposed to
appearances,
help us?
I mean, there'll be a small flock in the end of times. I mean, there's not going to be many Christians when Christ comes. I don't believe that. So of course it's not going to be too well, because the world is in the midst of a great apostasy.
So the purpose of religion, I suppose, is to bring people back to the straight path, as they say, if they stray off it.
Well, it's the salvation of souls. This is the purpose of Christianity. It has nothing to do with like a worldly institution or a kingdom of man. It's about a kingdom of God. And I think that's really where Rome has it wrong and Protestantism has it wrong. They have this kind of theistic evolution idea where man is progressing and we're going to have like this utopian society or something. And it's just too idealistic. That's really what I see.
Oh, I see it as a kind of Darwinian struggle for supremacy, with all these different religions. It's like, well, obviously the best one is going to prevail.
Are you a Darwinist?
So
the weak, the strong conquer the weak type of thing. Yes, I do.
Well, I think the moral should be, eventually triumphant, but obviously, people just divide themselves into groups. Religious groups are the most powerful groups. And in a way, if you don't think the religion of your country is working properly, you should find a better one. And that's, kind of what I'm about really. I mean, I live in Britain. Well, living in the West makes you think that Christianity is not the religion of Jesus, and because of all these problems with Jews and Muslims and immigrants, I think it's something to do with the failure of the Western religion, Christianity.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with you. I do think that the Western version of Christianity is a failure in a lot of ways. And I think that Orthodoxy itself has failed, like whatever world Orthodoxy is, this modernist idea. But to those that are holding to the traditional Orthodoxy, I believe Christ when he says that, the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. So, appearances are sometimes deceiving. Like, not all, sometimes weakness can be strength and strength can be a weakness. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I guess I sort of see it as a kind of accident waiting to happen, and there's a sort of logic to it in that if you believe in the Hegelian dialectic, it would be Judaism, thesis, Christianity, antithesis, and Islam, synthesis.
That's the way the Zohar sees it.
Right.
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that is a concept there. Yeah.
Well, I guess in a way it's a truism, because I guess Marx is saying, that all these ideas floating around and people will, latch onto to these ideas and then they'll fight each other, and, eventually we'll get to, a workers' paradise, which is.
Well, this is because the Zohar is full of Neoplatonism.
I'm afraid I don't really know the Zohar. And I suppose I tend to avoid books on mysticism and spirituality because it's so vague.
Like for example, Maimonides argued that God can only work through universals and not particulars. So
I'm not sure
how would he know that?
He said because he said God is immaterial, cannot be described.
Okay.
Right? So he did. So he separated this concept that God could have direct action in the world. Right? So this idea, it seems subtle, right? But this concept of metaphysics, right, it sort of brings in all sorts of, divisions like material versus immaterial, right? And this is of course Platonic, right? So these Platonic distinctions, right, they sort of hijack and piggyback on different forms of religion. For example, when the Jews expelled Spinoza from their Amsterdam community, they did so because he claimed that nature is God, and so God is not immaterial.
Yeah, it was heresy for him to equate the universe with God.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So this whole idea, right, which obviously had been constantly done, right, within the East, right? This is the idea that the encroachment of philosophy is a serious encroachment, right? And it has all sorts of implications. There's three major things on the table: religion, philosophy, and science.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And science can be rephrased as history.
Can it?
Right? I think it can, because I think history is just objective facts that have occurred throughout time, right? Or it should be, right, if we're sticking to the truth, right? So it should be scientific in its approach, right? And I think the scientific approach is not a philosophical approach, right? Because a philosophical approach tends towards idealism. This is why Machiavelli dismissed idealism in terms of political science, right?
I'm afraid I don't know about that. I'm afraid what you just said, I can barely keep up. I don't understand the concepts that you just mentioned to me, so I can't agree or disagree. I don't really understand.
Let me put it this way. Okay, in terms of tacit agreement for people in the West, right? Let's say like a Dawkins type of person, right? Right? They would agree.
You mean an atheist?
Yeah, an atheist, right? They would agree that progress throughout history, right? So they would agree that there's a movement throughout history of progress, of material progress and intellectual progress. This is what they believe, right? So they think that that happened in this sort of way. They think that theology gave birth to philosophy, and then philosophy gave birth to science, and they think that each time we're getting closer to the truth.
Okay.
And this is their tacit assumption. They presuppose all of this. They lay this all on the table like it's already been decided.
Yeah, I think it's.
And this is the techno-liberal worldview. This is part and parcel of the techno-liberal worldview. This worldview is called techno-liberalism.
Who coined the term? I only heard it through you.
I've heard it been used by others, but I can't remember. I'm using it because it's an apt term. I mean, there's technology and liberalism. They constitute a world state. They don't take into account Christianity, Islam, Judaism, white, black, Christian, Muslim, that sort of thing. They don't care about that sort of thing. Jewish, they don't care about any of that. Okay, it's whoever has the best technology. It's whoever has the most up-to-date science.
Oh, you mean might is right?
Of
Is that
course.
what? Okay, so it's about global empires.
That's an objective factor of power.
Okay.
Right. I believe so. Right. I believe that technology and science. Right. See, this is the thing: is that Muslim people believe, right? Chinese people believe, right? All sorts. Russian people believe that if they get the science and technology of the Western states, that they can surpass them because they can keep their traditions and have their science and technology. They're failing now because technology alters your values and traditions.
Well, we can't. Well, even if we are determined not to change, stuff happens to make us change. Which is why theocracies are no longer theocracies and monarchies are no longer monarchies, even when they rule with an iron fist. So, I mean that's why I laugh at people who say, "Oh, if you become a theocracy, oh, by the way, that's what I support. Things will just solidify and never change." It's like, no, even when you do these things still change and revolutions still happen. So even with the best will in the world, we cannot stop the world from changing. We can only hope to, we can only hope for the best by making sure people act for the best possible reasons based on truth and logic and morality, and therefore we have to choose the best the best religion for ourselves if we think we need a new religion, if our religion isn't working. And
No, I'll
I
be
guess
back in a second. I got to go pick up a book that got delivered today. I've been waiting for it.
okay.
I ordered The Prince. The principles of Machiavelli are found in the book The Prince, right?
Yeah, I have it too.
Is that right,
he
Tiano?
Yeah, that's right.
The
yeah,
principles of Machiavelli are found in the book called The Prince.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
yes, but Machiavelli wasn't talking about religion. He was telling.
Was Machiavelli a he was from the Renaissance, right? Trying to
Well,
promote.
he was going against two principles. He was going against the religion, right, in terms of morality, right, and he was going against and not that morality wasn't important. He definitely thought it was important to govern people, right, but he felt that morality in terms of using it as a science of leadership and how to govern, and saying that and holding princes up to some kind of moral standard. He thought that was to the
I'm just gonna assume it all went to plan. What?
to the destruction of the state.
I have a gun in my room. You give me
Yeah, he was like promoting the republic or something and trying to get like the people to be moral so that you wouldn't have to rule over them with the iron rod, but so like promote Christian, like the deists, like when they formed in 1776, our founding fathers were deists, so they wanted to use the Christians to build their new empire because they knew the Christians would not be bad people. You'd have to rule them with a rod. They'd be decent, hardworking.
That's the key thing, is that that people need to understand, is that Christians were used, right? They were used as basically cannon fodder, right, to promote science and liberalism, right? And they're still being used like that, right, while destroying their own traditions, right? So, right, so that's fascinating consequence, right?
I'll be right back. See you later.
Yeah, for sure, Rocky. Yeah, but
Yeah, so he was presuming to advise the prince how to govern the Florentine Republic. So he was a diplomat, an author, philosopher, and a historian. And yeah, he was just saying, this is how to rule a republic.
Bless you.
And some people thought, it was evil and, Machiavellian, which is, a synonym for evil, manipulate and being manipulative and that sort of thing. But he was really, just saying, well, if you rule your country properly, then it will, stay peaceful for longer. And I think he wrote his book in exile because he said something wrong, and then he was put under house arrest or something. Oh, that's my memory anyway.
Yeah, but he said that, because, Plato makes this whole idea about the city and speech, which he calls the noble lie. And he says that people need to believe in this myth, sort of, right? So the fact is that Machiavelli totally rejected this concept, right? And he said that this is a dangerous creation and it's to the ruin of the prince that they uphold such standards, right? So he said that.
Sorry, what standard? I didn't catch what you were
the
saying.
standards,
Holding
the
up a
standards,
lie.
yeah, the standards of Plato's idealistic state. So he thought that this concept that, the state could have a perfect function or a perfect method of rulership, he thought that the people should not be knowing about that. And there hasn't been many people who have said that in history. I think Lao Tzu is one of the people who said that. But his philosophy is a little bit arcane, right? But the fact is that, this idea that, you shouldn't have philosophical standards because that's idealistic, that you should actually trust history instead, that history is a better measure than philosophy ever will be, right? That was Machiavelli's concept. And he dismissed that princes should keep to a moral standard, meaning that that they should hold themselves to saying that, oh, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, that sort of thing. Because the fact is that a prince has to have those in public, but in private, he doesn't need to have those.
Yes, because because the monarch is above his subjects, so he gives the law.
Exactly.
And is not subject to the same rules, in the same way that, people might say that God, having created the universe, is not subject to the physical and moral laws of the system he created.
Yeah. So, but the problem is with Machiavelli that his major work was on republics. So he did not actively promote principalities. He just wanted to get a job with Lorenzo de Medici, so he wrote The Prince. So he wasn't he wasn't recommending it as a political program, unfortunately. But if it does work that way, right? I think it would have been able to preserve monarchy, right?
What?
Well, it was a republic, really. I mean, I think people do get confused about the republic and monarchy, but I mean, I think a republic has a larger pool of political talent and is more meritocratic than, a monarchy.
Well, not necessarily, but I definitely get the argument. I think there's something to be. I think you're onto something, but I do think that it depends on your definition of merit, right? And do you include a moral component, and by what metric do you measure that moral component, right? I think that's a big part of it.
Wisdom.
Well, I mean, by the same standard, you could also critique. I was just listening to Stefan Molyneux's Everyday Anarchy, and he was talking about how, democracy assumes two things. One, that people are wise enough to choose their leaders and know how to run society, and B, they're also moral to a large degree and wise to a large degree. And history has borne out that is either A, true if people are moral, or B, not true if people are immoral, right? So,
well, most people are stupid and most people are immoral. So, it doesn't make sense to even promote democracy. And really, when you think about it, it failed. It failed the ancient Athenians. It failed the ancient Romans. I don't know why we're adopting it, really, when you think about it. We've had, about 250 years of, failure. And oh, yes, and also George Washington actually warned Americans against political parties. I don't know if you know this, but I see that I'm talking to a whole bunch of Americans, and maybe they'll know what George Washington said in his farewell speech, which was to warn Americans against having political parties.
Yeah, I think that our current government situation is just kind of heading towards anarchy.
But
No matter,
aren't you guys pleased that it wasn't Biden again?
I don't know. I think that I maybe it's stupid, but I think they're both behind closed doors eating cheeseburgers. Like I don't buy it. I don't really think that there is really a two-party system.
Well, they tried to kill him, so I guess somebody thought he was the enemy. And he is
Yeah,
kind of saying, I want a few changes and all this stuff about, oh, I want the Panama Canal and Canada and Greenland. Is kind of saying a global empire is maybe
right.
too costly for us. So we're just gonna, rearrange the furniture and be, downsize our empire.
Well, and the other thing is this is like technology can either level the playing field, or it can also be mutually assured destruction, or technology can also basically make it so uneven that there's not even a playing field to consider, right? And so that's another part of whatever this reorganization that you're referring to is. Like, if you have infinite power essentially for you and whoever your incumbent leadership happens to be for the foreseeable future because of that power, well, do you need an aristocracy? Do you need a bourgeoisie? Do you need whatever
We do.
middlemen that we've always had, right?
Of course we do, because we know we need a proletariat, or we won't have a labor force to do the stuff that we might not want to do. I mean, the rich
Well,
and
but that's
poor.
why. But with robots and with AI and all these things, that kind of like nullifies that argument, right? I mean, potentially at least.
Well, yes, but until we have all those robots to do all the stuff we want to do, we still need our labor force. So we'll have to keep them around and
Sure,
keep them
but
happy. And
but the leverage of the proletariat is going away rapidly, meaning their access to leveling the playing field. Like, let's just take the Second Amendment in the United States, right? The idea that a weapon of war that's handheld is going to level the playing field against heat-seeking missiles and satellite laser beams or whatever they have, right? I mean, it's laughable at best, right? I mean, there's no way
well,
that
the Second Amendment
that's
is
gonna.
for Americans to protect themselves against their own government, not
Right,
weapons
but that's what
of
I'm saying is like,
destruction from another country.
does 200 million Americans with a AR-15 stand any chance against weapons of war that can basically read your watch from space allegedly? I mean, not really, right? So I mean, it's like it's not really a matter of that any longer, right? Based on technology wise, like, I mean, I don't think they're going to go and put their technology in the hands of people. So again, this is kind of what I'm trying to argue is like, well, in the foreseeable future, they need to play both offense and defense, meaning they want to maintain an empire, whoever they may be, I don't know, but they want to maintain their empire while maybe downsizing and preventing the leveling of the playing field among the proletariat or those that are in the higher echelons of aristocracy or warrior class or whatever you want to name it, right? So because otherwise their security of having that technology and technique and language trickery and media manipulation and AI and all this, like if you give everyone equal access to AI, for example, right, the amount of havoc you could wreak just by disinformation alone would be immeasurable, right? So you could literally just produce fake news and pump it out. You know what I'm saying? So just that
No,
alone could basically devastate any world power, right? So
well, I guess what they want to do with us is for us to obey their orders like robots, right? And until they actually have robots, they still need us to do, whatever they want us to do. And that's why, they try to control us by, telling us what's right and what's wrong and what's true and what's not and kind of thing. But, once they have robots, I guess they won't be needing us anymore. And they openly say that that's the end game. They don't want people. They're too inconvenient. They have their own opinions. They're hard to program. So they want robots. But in the meantime, they have to put up with us.
Right, but what I mean is, like, if the proletariat, for example, want any sort of leverage to make sure that once they reach a certain level of this process, that they don't have the ability to just basically, let us starve to death. Let's just put it that way. Or at the very least, live out in the wilds away from whatever construction they're building. Right, a breakaway civilization, essentially. Right. If we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, what leverage could we possibly gain as of right now? We don't really have the means of production. We don't have the means of, influence. We don't have the education of the children. We don't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it's all black pilled. I'm just saying, like, relative to what's going on, and I think it's mostly due to morality of the common person is just low. I think that's the main problem. But given
Are
that
you
problem,
sort of complaining about immigration? I sort of detect that you're kind of saying, what can we do if we don't like our government and our government is ignoring our concerns? Is that what you're saying?
well, you could use that as an example. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the people of England don't want 15 million people from all over the world just flooding their country. I'm pretty sure, but
Exactly. So it's like, well, they're doing stuff we don't like. They won't stop. So what can we do? And I'm saying we can't vote our way out of this, because it is actually voting that has caused all these problems. And I know I'm talking to Americans, and whenever I meet an American, I say, have you read Washington's farewell speech? Did you read that bit when he said, "Don't form political parties"? And I'm always faced with indifference, and who knows, who cares? We've done it now. We'll just carry on voting. But he did say that.
Well, I would also.
What was his plan? Was it to have a monarchy?
No.
What was it?
No, he was saying it will be the end of you, because if you have these political parties, they will divide you, and these are unnecessary divisions. I can find the bit if you want me to, because
I would argue that the best leverage that we could have had would have been basically an organization of labor, and to
Unions.
basically strike and become independent of the system. Now, I think at this point, everybody's too interdependent to make that a reality without, basically megadeath of some sort, right? Like, you're not gonna get away with that without a huge impact on the supply chains, et cetera. So now it becomes either a moral or amoral situation where it's like, well, are people willing to sacrifice convenience and security for some abstract concept of freedom or liberty or even morality, right? And I think that most people are going to say no, because if you have a sure meal coming versus a very uncertain, dangerous future, most people are just going to say, well, I can feed my children this way, and I probably won't survive, and my family probably won't survive the other way. So that's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. And again, I think it comes back to morality. Like, if people don't care about morality, then and again, I don't know what your position is. I'm just trying to say, like, from my perspective, I think if people don't accept morality as, like, the top one or two things that they're concerned with, which people kind of had to in a small community. Now we're in a global community.
Of course we have to agree to. Yes, we do have to. Morality is law, isn't it? We want our laws to be moral, and they have to be fair enough, or there will be rebellion and strikes and revolution and that kind of thing. So.
And you could argue that the laws are fair in a sense, but also that people don't take any ownership or responsibility based on where we're at currently. And again, like, I'm not saying that the system as it is good, but what I'm saying is, like, generally, the 10 commandments have been institutionalized. Don't kill, don't steal, don't, the other things we can't talk about, but you know what I mean? Like, so the general rules are basically agreed upon, right? The problem is, like, how they enforce and why they relationships, etc.
But they're not. I mean, in San Francisco, you can steal goods up to the value of $900.
Well, sure. I mean, I was there yesterday, so yeah. I mean, I know that I know what you mean, but my point is, essentially that the general population generally accepts that they don't want to be killed or whatever, right? So, but the question is like, well, how is it enforced? And again, I think it comes back to like the immigration thing as an example. If people are coming in and they basically think that laws are something to be taken advantage of for their own personal gain, well, that's not going to build a very cohesive system for people to live under. And if technology and global government is basically hitting the gas pedal and people are kind of being forced to choose in the moment of either convenience or safety versus, let's just burn it all down and hopefully something comes out of it. I mean, most people are just going to say like, I'm going to choose the safety and convenience because I don't
Okay,
really.
and usually they're not going to do anything, and they'll say, "I'll keep stew. I don't want to be cancelled. I'll shut up about gay marriage and transgenderism and our children
Yeah,
being
and
trans."
most people totally have chosen that, or at least they've been given like a very false, like, okay, I'll just complain about it on the internet and I won't go do anything else other than that about it, right? So I mean,
Yeah, and it's bad that instead of having face-to-face conversations in real life, we just think, oh, it's safer to talk to strangers on the other side of the ocean, and relieve our feelings that way. When really it's face-to-face engagements that will change people's minds and cause them to behave in a different way. But a lot of people are afraid of their children, and they don't want to have these difficult conversations. So that's why nothing is changed. And
I agree with you. I just want to make this point really briefly, just because it gives me the opportunity to say this. I mean, as someone who's tried to do that in person in political settings or business settings or et cetera, right? Or even personal familial settings, right? Generally what you find is like, you're fighting not only against people of a different opinion, but people of complete nihilism or apathy. And so now you're in a situation where people don't even care enough to get them motivated to see your point. It's irrelevant to them, right? They rather just, get subsumed into a nihilistic state because it's just easier. And I think we can moralize that all day long, but the reality is like that's just the situation that we're in. And I don't think there's a lot of good addressing of that problem, because maybe the consequences of looking at that problem is more uncomfortable than what we're talking about now, right? But I just want to make that point while I had a chance. Sorry.
yeah. So we need to find a way to change people's minds. It's always about stating your position, giving people an alternative, and making them believe that it's achievable, and then they might do something if they think they're going to benefit, and therefore it's all about changing the narrative. And I think since you are all talking about religion, I think religion is a group evolutionary strategy in that if you do believe in God, then you're going to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished in this life or the next, and you will be prepared to die for your principles, because fundamentally that's what principles are for. And that's why people don't want to have them, because it's like, oh, if I have principles and people will hold me to them, and notice when I break my principles, and even expect me to die for them, because basically that's what it boils down to. Particularly men. I mean, in this time of gender confusion, maybe men think it's better for us to have the same rights as women, and even to opt to be women, and it's like, well, who's going to do the work of the men, and who's going to defend the country? Because technically, well, I mean, historically, men were expected to defend their territory with their lives, right? That was the whole point of being a man. It's like, okay, women might occasionally die in childbirth, but men were definitely expected to defend their territory, and they couldn't just say, "Oh well, I'm going to desert." So because deserters have a certain reputation, they would be shunned, by their fellow men and by women, and they would be in disgrace. So unless we get back to that kind of thinking again, we won't be able to shame people into correct behavior.
They sent me the wrong book.
Oh no, how disappointing. What did you get instead?
Some Agatha Christie.
No, well, you might enjoy it if you don't return it. You might enjoy it. I enjoyed Agatha Christie.
It's called a book called And Then There Were None.
Oh, yes, it used to be called 10 Little Niggers.
And then I ordered Malice in Blunderland by Thomas Martin.
I don't know that one.
It's a satire. It's a satirical view of bureaucratic jargon and operations that reveal the way in which bureaucracies tend to turn into monstrous systems of waste and incompetence. It's
Right.
called Malice in Blunderland. Anyway, I read it about 30 years ago, and I want to reread it. Had some really good stuff in it.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess we do kind of need a bureaucracy if we want, marriage licenses, driving licenses, and all kinds of licenses, and things that we want our government to do for us. And
Well, bureaucracies are not constitutional in America.
are they? I think you need some bureaucracy to.
No, you're supposed to be able to vote people in and out.
I don't think you know what. I mean, bureaucracy is basically paperwork, writing. We need certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, and other stuff.
Yeah, I think I know what a bureaucracy is.
Yeah. I mean, it's always bad. I mean, it can be bad, but
Yeah, I'm going to share a screen and try to look at present John Winthrop's City on a Hill. If there was there's a 11-minute long video of it too, but I think that'll bore everyone to death, right? But this idea, I'll share this one, AmericanHeritage.org, right? This is a good one. And John Winthrop's ideas are foundational to the establishment of democracy in this country, right? And the main point is that he used St. Paul to argue for the same democratic ideas and concepts, that the founding fathers, argued for,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the main idea in terms of Christian nationalism. They always will point to that, right? They'll say the pure.
I was going to say. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please carry on. I was going to. I was going to say Christian nationalism is really white nationalism, but the smarter kind of white nationalist.
Right? That's right. That's right. I agree. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And that's why I want Christians to understand that it's just a new sort of liberalism that they're putting under the guise of Christianity, right?
Yep.
And yeah, and I think serious Christians understand this, that they will be totally diminishing their own traditions and their own European heritage, if they neglect their Christian heritage. All right. So the fact is that Muslims can be Muslims and Christians can be Christians if they just agree to stick to their own laws and standards.
So I just want to make a point very briefly about Christian nationalism, because it's been a big focus of mine the past few years here. And ultimately, I think the Christian nationalism and white nationalism, as an extension, or maybe the other way around, are ultimately a negative and a bad thing. I will, however, try to say that I think that it is worth examining white nationalism and Christian nationalism as a concept for a couple of reasons, which I don't have to get into right now. But I would just want to ask Claire, do you think that white nationalism is totally bad? Like, I think that it is generally a negative, like I said, but I do see some utility in it as far as from a pragmatic standpoint, which I'm not really a big fan of pragmatism, but I can see that there could be good arguments from a pragmatic standpoint for something to that effect. So just kind of curious what your opinion of it is, because again, I don't understand your full position, but secular Quranism sounds very interesting as far as those two concepts are related. So,
well, it's actually meant for white nationalists. It's like, look, if you're worried about your birth rates, then it just means you need to, marry early and have more kids and have more stable marriages and make sure you stay together for the kids. Otherwise, they'll be, delinquent, underachieving, criminal, and not particularly a credit to their parents. And that's all it is all marriage and family values, which, religions of all kinds, the 5 world religions anyway, promote, except that Christianity is the weakest link because, Christianity has been replaced by liberalism, and liberalism is, mutated into something horrible and nasty and mad and evil. And recently I've been trying to argue that, okay, white supremacy is basically the idea that white people don't need a religion, because, obviously everybody does. Even the Jews need a religion. That's why they retain their identity, because, even if not all of them practice their religion properly, some of them do. And that is, and that is what gives them their identity. And if nobody practices, just imagine if nobody practiced Judaism, then there would be no Jews and they would become extinct, right? So somebody's got to do it, even if not all of them do. And that is basically how it works. So it's like, okay, we're Jews, we have to do our Jewy thing and keep the Sabbath and, not eat pork and not eat, whatever it is. People who have heard of your group, know you're supposed to do, and this is what will define you.
well, sure. And the legacy of white people is essentially slaughtering each other for the past 2,000 years in Europe. However, they still maintained a population and an existence, regardless of that. Now, again, white is kind of one of these terms that basically, erases identity, and I disagree with it on those terms. But given where we are now, it is colloquially useful to kind of get the gist of like Western, Northern European, Anglo-Saxon people of a certain Christianity faith. And I mean, I was making the argument earlier today with a friend of mine, basically saying, white people as they exist, at least in the ones that I'm talking about, Northern European, Western European people, they basically synthesized paganism, pagan ideals and clans and tribes with Christianity to basically, I would say, from a secular point of view, inject virtue ethics into Christianity or the other way around. And I think that, or virtue ethics into paganism. And so that's kind of like what I would say is generally trying to be preserved by quote unquote white nationalism or white people or Western
It's
Europe.
a really effeminate Christianity too. Christ is just kind of looked at as like, is someone to pray to get a new car or something. Like, it's very weak. it's a weak Christianity. That's what I see.
Well, I think it depends on how far you want to take it back. Like, are we talking like pre-Charlemagne or post-Charlemagne, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think everybody prays to God when they want stuff from Him, right? And I guess if He's omnipotent, He doesn't mind. It's better that He makes religion.
I feel like at least the way that I think how He wants us to pray usually isn't for material things. I think we should be probably praying for spiritual things because God is spirit.
Well, I just want to make the distinction. Like, I don't think that 2,000 years in Europe, most Europeans were sitting there praying to God just purely for utility. I mean, I think it may have started out that way for some people.
I'm just saying what it is today in America. You know, it's kind of this prosperity gospel thing. I don't
sure,
think
but I think we can definitely agree that where we are in the West right now, like, we're not going to win anything, even if we quote unquote survive or take power, because ultimately we're not standing for something. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, based on where we are now, what is the rallying cry of getting quote unquote whites or people? And again, like, I think that there's good arguments to say that, like, if white people go away, a lot of the nice things in the world that people like, you know, morality from a virtue ethic standpoint is going to go away, and maybe it should. But I'm just saying that, like, you know, are we talking about with technology, without technology? You know, those are big ifs that are going to determine those things as well. And I don't know how to put into words what I'm trying to get across, but essentially what I'm saying is, like, yeah.
I wanted to ask you: have you considered other religions apart from Christianity?
Sure, I've considered them, but I would say that I think that faith is something that can go away in any religion, right? Like, it doesn't. I think, like, I don't judge somebody just simply by, you know, the title that they give their religion. I think that if you have faith in God or something that's much higher, then at least you're on some sort of grounding that you can reach each other at.
you're
right?
a humanist.
Yeah,
You're
no,
humanist.
no, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, you could definitely make that argument. What I'm saying is, like, if you just don't believe that there's anything that makes reality real other than, you know, I'm breathing air, I can see things, I can sense data, essentially, then, like, if all you are is a computer that is operating as a computer, I mean, then there's really nothing to argue with you about, essentially, right? But if you believe
Well,
that,
I mean,
something else, right?
I guess I'm asking you if you think Christianity is the only way for white people. Is that what you think?
Well, I think Christianity is.
That's a crazy.
I like that way. I like the way you put that. I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm just saying that
for all people.
I think Western European society is Christianity as far as we've recorded it. I mean, there's not really a recorded history before Christianity that I'm aware of. So that's number one.
You
Number
have
two,
the Greek pantheon, but, you know, obviously that failed, and also the Nordic pantheon, and that failed. So, I'm just saying the problem is really straightforward. It's sort of like, well, white people, what have they got in common? They haven't really got a religion that they really believe in. Of course, they can say, anybody can say I'm a Jew or a Muslim or whatever, but, you know, if they don't believe in it, there's no point, is it?
I think that there's a lot of people that do believe in it, but I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not just trying to argue with you for no reason. I think that I get where you're coming from, but I think that it could be argued that we're still running on the residuals.
I'm going to let credit.
Yeah, I'm going to let DK on. Just try not to interrupt each other, guys. Sorry, I forgot you're in the back. So yeah, so here's the thing. Ask me that question again, if you don't mind. Just rephrase that one more time. I want to make sure I give you an actual answer, because this is a very important question that you're asking. Is Christianity the only thing for whites, right? Is that the question?
Well, yes, because we were talking about Christian nationalism, and I think you were saying it's a kind of busted flush, and you can't use it again, and you know.
Well, I guess
Actually, that's what I was saying in chat. It's generally like the white nationalists. They generally choose either Christian or pagan beliefs to try and run their organizations by, depending on which group you look at. But it's either Christian or pagan. They generally go by one or the other. So it's not always strictly Christian.
Yeah, I suppose the Jews and the Muslims would say, well, it's idolatry. And then, and I know a lot of people don't care that it is. And I guess if you're atheist, you don't see the harm of it. But I guess the harm of it is that, people with a stronger, more easy to explain and believe religion will have the upper hand, such as the Jews and Muslims who, have a very simple but strong conception of God.
I agree with you, and I think that what you guys were talking about with Machiavelli and Plato and noble lie versus an ignoble truth, perhaps. I mean, I think that those are very important questions that I'm trying to drive towards. And I don't have a prescription per se, but I definitely think that, like, if we're looking at it from a pragmatic standpoint, is Christianity in the West salvageable? That is a very important question. Do I think that it is? Of course, I believe that it's possible. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, because from a Christian standpoint, you're never going to see many people accept true Christianity, and we've already built that into our religion. So it's not going to be a surprise to me if that fails ultimately. But
yeah, because
it's going to fail in a worldly sense, in a
exactly.
worldly sense,
from a worldly
so
sense, yes.
Again, it's not necessarily about a kingdom of this world to us. It's not about taking over land or something. To us, this world's going to, end in fervent heat. So I'm not saying what is the point of doing good things or, you know, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to work towards saving our souls, and if we're transforming ourselves through this process, so be it. If something else gets transformed along the way, but as far as this idea, like, I don't know that, the conception of God from like a Jewish person or someone that's in Islam is more solid. I would highly disagree with that, because I see, Judaism as a perversion of orthodoxy, and I see, and Islam pretty much the same way as an Orthodox Christian. But that's my take on
but
it.
Judaism came before Christianity, so I guess Jews would say, "Oh, hey, you stole our religion, you stole our clothes from us," and
Well, I
Well,
mean,
I think that's a
is it
total.
really stealing, or is it,
I think it's a total
relaying it the
misrepresentation.
way it's supposed to have always been? Because to us, we're looking at it like this. It's like the prophets to us, had always spoken about the Trinity and the coming of Christ, and so they just sort of missed it and they perverted
Right,
it in some way. That's
and
our
and
view.
yeah, and personally, I just want to say that, like, from my own point of view, I think that Christianity and Islam have the upper hand in this sense, and I think that it's something that we should really push forward. And again, I know this is ecumenical and all the caveats aside. I think that retconning history back to what I see as truth, which would be essentially that what he just said, that Christianity has always existed and Islam has always existed, and I think those two narratives are not only true, but they need to be propagated out, because if people have the impression that this kind of weird Gnostic religion that we colloquially call Judaism has always been the end all be all of Western civilization, and that everything else is a heresy. I mean, I think that's a gross misrepresentation of the truth as far as I understand it. And if somebody can actually prove that otherwise, I'm open to it. But like, a lot of the history that people are reading is total retconning of history and philosophy and all these other things and religion from what I've seen, right? And I think that that's kind of my answer to what you're saying. And again, from a pragmatic standpoint, a materialist standpoint, I think that, I mean, I'm a Christian. I think it's true and all that. And again, I don't think it's my job to like make somebody believe what I believe, but what I do think it's my job to do is live my faith and hopefully inspire others to live their faith in a trying to get closer to God. The whole point of Christianity is theosis and getting closer to God. And I think if everybody had that general goal, then the world would probably get a little bit better over a long enough course of time. But at the same time, I think having that as the expectation that you're going to see that in your lifetime or even in 100 lifetimes is foolish. That you're going to see the fruit of that endeavor. But
Let me
I'm
point
not
out
to
a
correct
little
you in any
something.
way. I think that the world is never going to get better. I think this world is Satan's. It's his. This world, we're not of this world, and anything in this world, it's sort of already given to him. It's already his. You
sure.
know,
But
I
all I'm
don't
saying
have
is that
any
all I'm saying
expectations
is
out
that
of it.
if people were striving towards theosis, it would be hard to say that like it's not going to make an impact that the world would get better, right? I mean, it may
Absolutely.
not
I
look.
think that
Yeah,
on an individual basis, there would be a transformation, a sanctification of land through man, to that extent. But it can't be our goal. And I that's my biggest thing. And it's because really this whole theistic evolution idea that we've seen with, this Deacon Ananias and these people who are, talking online as if they know what they're talking about, and they really don't.
Well, that's the main problem in my opinion. And I know DK wanted to say something too, but I just want to say really quickly that the main issue is it's found in this idea that Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and Richard Dawkins, they can all easily use this term Judeo-Christian to describe Western values. And there's a Jew, a spiritualist, and an atheist, all using the term Judeo-Christian to describe Western values. And I think that's a much more grave danger, right?
I mean, what are Western values anyway?
Yeah, that's the point. That should be clearly defined. Right?
So what I was going to say, going back to what I was going to say, back to an earlier point in the conversation, was the fact that most religious texts were written in Hebrew by Jews. So there's where your first problem lies. And the fact that most religious texts were written by Jews because they were the only people who could read and write back then. So that's the first problem. That's why they're always written in as the chosen ones, because they're the ones that wrote it. But then people forget that in the Christian text, in the New Testament, when Jesus is about to be crucified or something, it's like, when you kill me, you will be removed from the kingdom of heaven. So in the New Testament, in Christianity, Jews are not the chosen people. They have been removed from the kingdom of heaven. And yet everyone still goes on about Christianity being Judeo-Christian. See, people really don't actually look into things as much as they think they do sometimes. The
Well,
Jews are
Judeo-Christian.
removed from the kingdom of heaven, according to Christianity.
Well, Judeo-Christian is a kind. It's a
It's an oxymoron.
post-war
It's an
label.
oxymoron.
Here, hold on, DK. Let her
Yeah,
say
I
something.
agree with you. I agree with you. But it's a new term. I mean, people would just say Christianity before World War II, right? Judeo-Christian is a post-war formation of,
Well, let me steel man the Judeo-Christian argument. Here's the Judeo-Christian argument. The Enlightenment and the Renaissance were basically an injection of, basically, Gnostic heresy into Christianity under the guise of redigging up the classics and retconning the Bible into the KJV and all this stuff, and it goes back to British Israelism and the Cromwell stuff and all this. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on that I would say. So, like, in a sense, you could say Judeo-Christian, as in like Christianity has been subverted in a real way. And again, I would agree with Unseen. I guess he's not here right now, but I would agree with him that that Catholicism was the first Protestantism, and then you had a secondary version But really, all that stuff with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment is coming out of the Kabbalah and stuff like that, from what I understand. So eventually, is that Judaism, or is that Gnosticism, or is that occultism, or whatever you want to call it? From that sense, yes, the last 500 years of Christianity in the West has been subverted by what we call Judaism or Kabbalah or whatever you want to call it. So in that sense, yes, I would say that there is Judeo-Christian values. But that's not what people generally are referring to. People think they're talking about virtue ethics or something like that, but they're not. They're talking about something else, in my opinion. So I think that that's kind of the trick. And if you want a good example of that, go read, go listen to Peter Thiel's 500 anniversary about the speech about the Protestant Reformation, and I think he gives a very interesting speech about Judeo-Christian values from that point of view. But I think that's my spin on, like, if I'm going to use the term Judeo-Christian to mean something real, that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that, obviously Christianity is, or this chimerical concept, Judeo-Christian, and also the concept of universalism, right, being mixed in.
Well, they're going for a one world religion anyway. That's
Yeah,
their
and
intention.
sorry, and just to be fair, I think you could try to make the argument that it was Greek and pagan philosophy and even Mithraism and all these other things and Zoroastrianism that was injected into Christianity. Sure, you could try to make those arguments and say that Christianity is a syncretic whatever, and it's a idol worship. Or I think there's an argument to be made there. Sure, I'm open to the argument, but I think that it's a lot weaker of an argument than to just go back 500 years and say, like, let's start here and then maybe work our way backwards from there. Like, I think we have more to stand on from 500 years ago. You see what I'm saying? I just want to say, like, I'm open to those arguments. I just think that it's easier to start with the Enlightenment first and then say, okay, what went wrong here, and then we can try to figure out beyond that once we get that down. So.
Yeah, it's because there's this whole concept of the Haskalah, or the Jewish Enlightenment. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. After the Enlightenment, they had the Jewish, Enlightenment. People like Moses Mendelssohn and all these people, they wanted to reform Judaism, right? So the whole concept is that, Judaism had reforms. Like Hasidism and all of these ideas in the 15th century. They had inventions like the Lurianic Kabbalah. So the fact is that, these, religions have been updated for the modern world, right? And obviously Islam is trying to play a role, trying to say that it created science during the Dark Ages. This is how they want to appease Jews and Christians and try to claim some sort of stake within this project and claim that they're an Abrahamic religion and that they're just as progressive as any of these other faiths. And I think that that's a fundamental flaw, right? I think that is a danger. I think the Salafis are causing this danger. They're trying to subvert Islam and make it in line with science and liberalism. And I think obviously Muslims need to oppose this. And I think it's the only chance that people have, in terms of, finding a sort of real opposition. That way Christianity can create its own stake as opposed to Islam, right? And because I don't know if Westerners are going to go along with the Muslim project, but they definitely ought to go along with the white Sharia project, right, to save their ass, right? There's my little.
Well, certain countries are used to Sharia law, but if you try to impose that on any other country, then it seems like outright war. See, this is why I am actually more National Socialist. I believe different countries should be governed differently.
Yes, I mean, nobody can stop you from governing a country.
According to the beliefs of that society. Trying to bring a different society's beliefs into a foreign country and pushing their beliefs on a foreign country, that becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank
so
you,
DK-spiracy.
DK, hold on.
Seeing this happen right now in
Yeah,
many
DK.
Western countries.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, DK-spiracy, do you have a religion, or is it just National Socialism?
No, my personal beliefs are actually quite a bit more spiritual than anything else. But there's bits and pieces from a lot of religions. All my beliefs are my own, and I did actually find out later on that they were parts of other religions. I didn't even know it at the time. But yeah, my beliefs are actually my own. I don't follow any organized religion.
But do you see that if you want to organize people who agree with you, you kind of need to call your belief system something, right? And maybe calling it National Socialism is not going to attract a lot of people.
I don't call my belief system National Socialism.
Oh, I thought you were saying
That's
that
a
you
great
were
point.
a National Socialist. But
No,
you
I
see,
said I believe National Socialism is a good idea. I didn't say that was my belief system. I said it's a good idea. No, each nation should be allowed to govern itself according to its society rather than have foreign views and religious beliefs pushed on them. That is what I
yeah. So
I don't think Christians should walk over to like a Muslim nation and start telling everyone to stop committing Sharia law. I don't think that would work that way either. But
unless there's war, and then
but yet, everyone is allowing Muslims, especially in the UK, allowing Muslims in, and it's getting closer and closer to Sharia law now.
Well, it
because
isn't.
Every Muslim is walking free for stabbing and raping people, while people who post anything about it online are going to jail. See, there's where things start to fall down. When someone else's views get imposed in a foreign nation. That's
well,
the
it's
problem.
the government that does this. It's not like some Sharia government. It's actually
Really? Look
His
at who's in the
Majesty's
government.
government.
Who was the last Prime Minister in the UK?
He was a Hindu. He was a
Hindu. Yeah,
Right.
We're not gonna cry about the grape gangs because the fact is that there's tons of human trafficking going on inside Western countries, right? So let's just they can't get rid of the problem just by getting rid of
That's going on
Muslim
all
gangs.
over the world. Blaming Western countries for it isn't winning.
Yeah, and blaming Muslims isn't going to be doing it either. So let's just move on.
I wasn't. Sorry, I wasn't blaming Muslims. It's just a good example in one country.
Yeah, the punishment for graping people is stoning within Islam. But yeah, just clarifying that. But yeah.
Yeah, well,
because the punishment for rape is death.
Here, hold on, DK. Here, hold on, DK. Let Claire talk. Blessings.
I'm just saying that under Sharia, a rapist would be executed, so they would be punished more harshly than under the current law.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad. So I'm glad that we got to this discussion because I kind of mentioned it before.
That used to be true before in America. They used to do that too,
Right. Exactly. Right. So here's the point I've been kind of wanting to bring up about this kind of thing, because obviously as soon as people kind of called out Elon for saying, what's wrong with bringing a bunch of Indians into America? He said, well, look at all the Muslims and they're worse. So, blah, blah, blah. So obviously there's this kind of program going on. And so I understand that everybody has opinion about this. And I think that there's truth in everybody's opinion that I've heard recently. So I understand what's going on. But I think from my point of view, the thing that I think is interesting is like, if people in Western countries don't have control of their government, and they're bringing in people who also don't have control of that government, but they're having kids, and eventually they will outpopulate those people. And there's a certain place in the Middle East that's trying to make a greater space for itself that we can't really talk about. And then and they're sending these people to our country against the will of the people. And again, I'm not even saying it's all about that certain country over there. What I'm saying is like, what is the way that we're going to have any sort of leverage over our own governing systems with the way technology is going? And I think that's really the question that I'm trying to figure out.
It's not even to do with technology, Neuro. It's really about your society and who's in charge. And the whole reason why all these world religions that you've heard of support marriage is to make sure that married fathers are the privileged ones who call the shots. And if they do, society is run better than, if it is, non-parents or women or, people who used to be considered to be sex offenders running the show. Right? Because, at the very least, whatever your group or race or nation, you need to produce the next generation, and you need to produce, good quality ones or ones that are not worse than the current generation. And this calls for, sex selection and jumping through hoops to get, a spouse and stuff.
The problem is that even Muslim societies are struggling because their kids are on social media, right? And they're being the culture is being imported from Western society, right? So, there's also this threat. But Neuro, you gonna say something?
Yeah, just really briefly, I agree with both of you guys' points. I think the other thing to remember is that a lot of what we talk about with drug trafficking and sex trafficking and all these things, it is for profit, but it also has always been a part of this kind of induction to secret societies and blackmail and interlocking things where they're doing all this for a greater purpose. I mean, the story about Epstein is a lot wider of a problem than people take it. They say, well, what's all this about? Well, they always talk about the celebrities. They don't talk about the scientific community and academic community and politicians that were involved in that, and just how easy it is to control people when you basically they don't even have to participate. They can just be a witness to or a party to something. And if everyone around you won't participate, is too afraid to do what's right. So again, I'm just saying, like, this is kind of what I'm trying to say is like, how can we as the proletariat, for lack of a better term, take into consideration like what we're facing. We're facing like, the largest military empire that the world has ever seen. And most people are just either willingly or unwillingly just participating in that. I mean, that's, and the people who should be able to work from within this system are either unwilling or unable to do so. So I think from my point of view, fighting against the nihilism has got to be a big part of that, because the average proletariat is just too nihilistic to even comprehend what we're talking about here. And again, I know that may not be directly related to what you guys are saying. I'm just trying to.
I'm so glad you mentioned nihilism, because basically nihilism is an obstruction to focused and effective political activism, because people are so nihilist they won't even agree with you, even when they do. They might agree with you, but they're not going to say they agree with you because of reasons, right? They don't want to be seen to be saying, anything unusual. It might get them cancelled, kicked out of their group, all kinds of things. Well, I think most, honest, rational, decent people would speak the truth as they see it, if that is what they think. But if people won't even make a point of speaking the truth or defending it, then, nothing's going to come right, is it?
Well, and I think a lot of what you're seeing with like the Alex Joneses and the Joe Rogans and the Elon Musk of the world is they're voicing some of these concerns out in the open, saying, oh, that Epstein guy, this is a problem. Look at all this blackmail. They're giving you a limited hangout version of voicing this. And again, I think that's like Machine said, I think the big problem with social media, and I'm going to do more about that kind of stuff too, because the evidence is coming out that essentially it's creating psychopaths and basically making people feel as if they're part of and you mentioned this too, Claire, that people are part of a tribe that doesn't really exist. And I'm not saying that here about us per se, because I think we're looking at it at a higher level, but I'm saying that in general, people are just falling into like a general lack of a tribe, and it's just not a natural state for human beings. Or I don't think, and again, this is a secular view, but
Yeah,
I'm
we
just
need a
saying that it
leader.
applies spiritually as well. But
We need a
It's not even
leader.
just that. It's the fact that, like, especially for the younger generation, look what they just did to people over the last 5 years. So this younger generation in particular just got locked down, shut in their house, and couldn't go and socialize with people. Was told to stay away from people, wear
Right.
masks.
We got to move off
Schools
that
got shut
subject.
down.
We got to
So they
totally
Yeah,
move off that
yeah,
subject.
we agree.
So
With,
they
it's all
just got
about
stuck
them.
online.
Yeah,
They
and they have
started
their
to
lives
find
destroyed.
people online. That's what exactly happened. They tried to find people online. They tried to find a new group of friends because they couldn't actually go and see anyone in real life.
Yeah, thank you,
That
DK.
was actually a programmed result. That is what they wanted.
So we need to collectively agree about what the problem is, and maybe even agree about what the solution is. I mean that's a logical way of solving the problem, and then hopefully we'll get somebody to lead us to success. I mean that's how it's done, isn't it? We have a problem. What is the solution? How are we gonna
Hegelian dialectic. When you
We're gonna
need a
make
hero, we will provide one.
our leader.
But we and that's why hierarchy is so important, because when we talk about a leader, it's like, yeah, we need somebody that we collectively acknowledge is the best of us, who we can trust.
So that would have to be a monarch, right?
Well, not necessarily, because a caliph was not
pick your ruler.
a
Choose
monarch.
who you want to rule over you.
Yeah, and how should he be chosen?
Exactly. Because democracy just means that 51% dominates 49%.
If you have a benevolent monarch, wouldn't that be good?
Yeah, but how do we know that the monarch is benevolent? That all these, politicians who smarm and schmooze, and when they get elected, they become different people, don't they?
Well, let's go back to what
I would
America
elect,
used to do. Once you get into politics, there is no pay. No pay for public service. Let's see how long these career politicians last without getting paid any money. Or will it all just be
you need to pay them properly.
Or will it all just be lobbyist things, and it will actually be exposed because they shouldn't be getting any money. They shouldn't be getting paid by anyone.
Yeah, I mean, they make their money through private interest. They don't make their money through politics necessarily, but
Yeah,
I hear what you're
exactly.
saying.
Yeah. That's the way American politics used to be run. There was no pay for
which
public
ends
service.
up being conflicts of interest.
Or pay peanuts, you get monkeys who take bribes.
Dude, if you pay shitloads, you get monkeys who take bribes.
Well, then you have to check. Well, then you have to make.
I promise to be benevolent. Make me the king. I promise.
Yeah, me too.
Lol, Rocky.
I mean, we can, I suppose, decide, which of us is honest and reasonable and principled. I mean, that will be a start, right? And if we're going to do that,
maybe not reasonable.
Yeah, but I mean, you need some way of working out who to trust and who not to trust, and that is why religion is important.
I think the best idea would be just an odd numbered council of people, so that there will never be a hanging vote. I don't think any single person should be in charge of any nation. I believe that we should go back to borough councils, which are just small districts, and one representative from each of them goes and meets every few months or whatever, discusses how shit's going.
Yeah, that sounds hauntingly similar to representative democracy, but all right.
Yeah, well, it kind of is, but it breaks it down to rather than everyone elects a whole leader, like the one leader for the whole government. You do have like, you know, a chief or whatever of your village. Someone gets appointed.
You're
to,
arguing
go
for
and-
smaller. You're arguing for smaller territories.
Smaller, yeah, definitely smaller territories, so that there's more direct control over the areas that you live in, rather than it being like an overreaching
That's what the
whole
Civil War
government
was all
one
about.
control system of the whole country.
That's what the Civil War was all about. Civil War was states' rights.
Yep.
Federalism started.
Yep. Exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah. In most wars, the good side lost.
And, I think
And
there
the
was,
victors write the history books.
yeah.
So,
So you definitely need to
are we
rid of
agreed on Sharia?
No.
I'm agreed on it.
Oh, hey,
Sad trombone.
that was actually another thing, another point I wanted to make earlier. The UK actually has a prisoner exchange treaty with Pakistan. So any of those people who have been arrested in Pakistan, in the UK for any of their crimes, could instantly be extradited to Pakistan and go and face their charges there. Instead, they're all getting released into the UK. Most of them are not even seeing the inside of a prison cell.
Well,
Great stuff,
in
DK.
the book of Daniel.
I mean, like you're saying you're for Sharia law. If you're for it, let's send the people who like know that's what it's like in their country, but think it's okay to do it in another country.
Where's
Let's
the
send them
where's
back
the
to their
countries?
country, face
Here, hold on.
justice.
Here, hold on, DK. Where's the country that has Sharia law?
Pakistan.
Nope. Wrong. Wrongo.
It's a
I
secular country.
I was born there, DK. They don't have Sharia law in Pakistan.
Oh, don't they?
No, they don't. So you need to get your facts straight.
Oh no, actually, I thought they did. I know this.
Nope.
I know
Nope,
their
they don't.
sentences. I know their sentences are harsher than the UK though.
That
They would-
doesn't matter. Sharia law is
I
a
think-
cohesive system. It's not
Yeah.
applied in Pakistan.
It's not a theocracy. It's a secular
Okay.
democracy.
To be honest, I actually thought it was. I thought Pakistan.
Yeah, of course.
was-
There's lots of misinformation out there. Yeah.
I don't mind
Yeah.
being corrected. It's okay.
Maybe we could just get rid of the executive branch and have judges like it was, you know.
Yeah, the problem is they're all owned now as well.
It is the political parties that's a problem. Nobody will accept it.
It's not,
No,
no, it's not. It's the fact that the
Okay,
political
I'm going.
parties
Can I
own
read for you what Washington actually
Yes.
said about political parties? It's not very
Yes,
long.
please.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Why was George Washington opposed to political parties? In the vast and storied history of this country, there's only ever been one president who did not represent a political party: George Washington. Every man since who has occupied that prestigious position has been elected to represent not only the people, but the platform and policies of a political party. When President George Washington left public office, he cautioned the nation not to divide themselves into political parties. In his farewell address, he stated that the spirit of the party, quote, serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection, unquote. Was he able to see into the future and the division his beloved nation would face in the years to come? Perhaps not, but he certainly saw with clarity the dangers of partisanship in this American experiment. In his administration, he attempted to form a government that was above partisan ties and petty squabbles. But that was not to be. Why was George Washington opposed to the creation of political parties? Division in his cabinet. The dangers of political party tension was played out in the microcosm of Washington's own cabinet. In the years of his presidency, Thomas Jefferson, his Secretary of State, and Alexander Hamilton, his Secretary of the Treasury, vehemently disagreed with each other on a number of issues that arose in the administration. Hamilton vocally advocated for centralized government power, whereas Jefferson preferred for governmental power to be as close to the people as possible rather than held in the hands of an elite few. Their animosity towards one another and their ideas created tension and hardship in the first administration, and Washington saw how potentially dangerous the creation of political parties would be not only for future administrations but also for the nation as a whole. Division in the nation, and this is a quote from him. In a republic such as ours, the people must seek the interests of the country over their own. Washington foresaw how the formation of political parties would devastatingly tamper with Americans' ability to see members of the other party as fellow citizens rather than political enemies. To that effect, he wrote, the alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns his disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. The division of the nation that Washington foretold has undoubtedly come to pass, though this is not new or even a surprising revelation. Our nation has been bitterly divided before, even to the point of a bloody civil war. As we consider how best to move forward as a nation, perhaps it is worth considering heeding this voice from our past, whose worries were proven right over time. However political parties may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. The end. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, of course. Yes, the warnings against banks, political parties, and newspapers, the media. This was, I think this was great,
Yep.
great contributions by the founding fathers. In all those respects, we've greatly failed. All of these institutions have taken over the government, point blank.
There's also a verse in the Koran that warns against dividing your religion into sects and rejoicing in your own doctrines. I think it's chapter 6, verse 159.
Well, I think the commandments in Christianity and in Islam and even in Judaism against interest. I think those are
obviously
very.
it's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's something that has caused
untold amount of misery. And pain.
Yeah. So I mean, talk about keeping laws on the books. That Christian Muslims can solve the problems of the world with. And I agree. That is something that is about political institutions that need not be about our technological progress or anything like that, right? But it's something that comes down to a moral issue, and how we want to institute the laws in our country. So yeah, we've massively failed there. James Life Talks. You could come up if you go to Neurojack's channel. The link is available there, but I'm not sure where you're speaking from, sir. But yeah, blessings to you and your family.
Well, I've got to go.
Yeah, no
well,
worries.
thank you.
I have to go soon too. Thank you so much for coming, Claire. Blessings.
Thank you.
Yeah, I invited Claire here. I thought we'd have a good discussion because we had a pretty bad one the other day. We were talking to some sort of I don't know, some sort of white nationalist British guy. He was not willing to have a good discussion, then started gaslighting me, so I just left.
Oh, even worse than Bruno.
Well, well, you know, Bruno didn't say, are you having mental issues or something? So right,
That he did not.
Yeah,
He
so
pretty
even
much
Bruno,
said everything else.
yeah, so even Bruno's more tolerable than that guy, right? I have
Sheesh.
to say, right? Yeah, I mean, I had a
That's pretty bad.
I had a long going exchange with Bruno. He took a lot of abuse from me, so I really appreciate him, right? And that's why at the end of the